it's hard when your feet dangle. Imagine little kids, they have to sit on chairs that dangle.
Yeah, this is true.
I know Veda sitting on the toilet, his feet are just dangling. I'm like, oh, dude.
But you can put something,
Yeah, a little stool or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Pulling up our interview questions. You have the interview questions pulled up? Okay. Okay, so I'll just introduce the podcast and we'll get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you. This is Answers of Life. Welcome back. And today we have Mother Taruni, a.k.a. Linda, a.k.a. Mammy. She's my grandmother. And I couldn't pronounce nanny when I was a kid, so it was Mammy. But we're going to talk today, just ask her a few questions, do an interview-style podcast episode today. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, follow, share with a friend or with somebody that you don't like very much, if you don't like us very much, but share it with somebody, and we'll get into it and get started here. So, welcome, Mammy.
Hi.
Yeah, we're very happy.
Nice to be here.
We're just going to ask you a couple questions here. I'll start with, do you want to maybe just, I thought we could kind of start at the beginning of your life, start at the beginning, so to speak, and just talk about like maybe a little bit about your childhood and such, and like kind of how you went from the situation you were born into, and a little bit about what that situation was, and then how that led to you choosing to, like, vegetarianism, Krishna consciousness, all the things that you chose that led to the rest of the dynasty of the Stalker family being born.
Sure. So I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my parents were very kind, and I was raised in the Jewish tradition. We weren't extremely religious, so to speak. We would go on high holidays, maybe occasionally on a Saturday. My brother was bar mitzvahed, so we had that ceremony. And I went to Hebrew school some. And I remember being attracted to the Hebrew language particularly. And also, one memory that stuck with me from Hebrew school was learning at the drinking fountain, the water fountain, to offer the water before I drank it. So there was some prayer to offer this to God.
Right.
And then, growing up, I remember one thing that struck me was sometimes at the high holidays and other times just at a regular meal was the fact that there was animal parts on the table. And my parents were very kindly toward animals. If a random dog got hit in the street, because at that time dogs ran kind of wild, and they weren't so wild, but they were loose.
Right.
My father would cry. And so I remember, just at some animal dying, he would shed a few tears. And I remember thinking of the, disparity of how this doesn't make much sense, that we're eating animals and yet we're worried about them on another hand. On the other hand, we had cats, we had dogs, so we also took care of animals in the house. The first death that I saw was a rabbit, and I remember being quite shocked at that, rigor mortis, and how once alive, now dead. So those experiences kind of drove me toward, when I became 15, I saw an operation on lung cancer, and when they opened up the chest, it was in school, in the auditorium, and they opened up the chest of the man, and it looked like a side of beef that my mother might cook, and that was it. I did not eat meat after that. So, that was one difference that I was pursuing as a youngster that wasn't in my culture.
How old were you?
15.
She's
Okay.
Yeah. It was a developmental process.
Right.
And I think I once babysat, maybe when I was about 12, for someone who was a vegetarian. And so I remember the concept coming that that is a possibility.
Right, you had the idea that you could do something like that if you chose to.
And the different things that were in the refrigerator, you know. So so then, let's see, my girlfriend was living on the street that I grew up on because her mother had died at a very early age. So she was living with her aunt. And then eventually she moved in with her dad once he got a place and everything. Or had facility, you know, things got necessarily, what's the word, an upheaval when the mother died. So my girlfriend, having lost her mother at a very early age, was significant to me. And then I saw how worried she was on a daily basis about her father's life. Then a couple of years later, like she might have been 8 or 9 when her mom died. But then when her dad died, she was maybe 12, 13.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So that hit me really hard. Like, what kind of a world? This was a very big turning point for me. What kind of a world have we come to?
Yeah.
That we die.
Right.
That you lose people.
Yeah.
It made no sense.
Yeah, it's very saddening.
Yeah, very saddening. And I was thinking, well, what happens after death? So this promoted that kind of thought. And I don't know what I missed in Hebrew school, but I didn't have a clear idea of God. And I did not have a clear idea of what happens after death, of any idea of life after death. There's some vague idea, but it was very vague. So I was actually contemplating somehow or other and the idea of not existing, because to my knowledge, this is what we had. So then I remember laying on my bedroom floor just thinking and thinking and thinking, how is this that you could not exist? What would that be like? And all of a sudden I got this feeling that I had made a wrong turn to get into a world where and I felt a little implicated in the fact that I was in a world where people die.
Wow.
And then...
When you say implicated, I'm sorry, you mean like you felt that you had a part to play
and why she was here.
Why you were here.
Yeah, some part. You know, not necessarily the whole thing, but yeah. And so that gave me the sense of my actions are very important. What I do matters.
Yeah.
And it also gave me something of a drive toward knowing more about life and more about myself and my connection to the universe. So at some point, I think I was around 14, I actually, when I was a real little kid, if I was bored, I would sit out. We didn't have much TV or electronics. I would sit outside on the stoop and smash rocks for fun. We had a lot of rocks around, and it always looked like fairy dust to me, and it looked very sort of ethereal, jewel-like, and so at some point when I was around 14, I decided that rocks were kind of like a what's the word? Like a symbol of the entire universe. That there was some connection and primal. And so I sort of set up some kind of little altar kind of idea, put it in a special place and honored a rock that I'd found. So then, you go on with your life, and we were living in New York City, and in 1966, my husband and I, and we were boyfriend and girlfriend at that time, in the East Village of Manhattan. And A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, as we call him, had come there and was giving classes, had his books in the local bookstore, the East Village bookstore. So at that time, he was chanting in the park, sitting, chanting, singing. Few followers with him, dressed in Swami robes, and we encountered them in the park. I think that was, the first encounter was actually my husband Yadunandan. He saw the books in the bookstore, and he would pick them up almost daily and
That's
look
Papa.
through. Look through. It was a little
is
hard to
Papa.
understand. Didn't have much money. Put it back, whatever, But then we encountered the chanting in the park, and then in the local head shop, they called it some kind of a odds and ends shop. They had a sign that was Bhagavad Gita classes, 26 2nd Avenue, from Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta. And, it was in the evening, so we ventured down there once or twice and, became familiar with chapatis and the chanting a little bit and heard a lecture. And it was all very intriguing, but we weren't quite ready to, come often. We wanted to visit more, but then we ended up moving out of that area and out of the city altogether. So we lost track of the devotees. So that's kind of how we, it was intriguing. I learned the mantra.
In New York,
In New York.
And then
In
when
67.
you guys
66.
left,
66.
you lost contact with that.
Right, with that direct thing. But we were still like reading the I Ching, searching. We had a Bhagavad Gita by somebody else.
Okay.
Like
How
that.
old were you then at this point?
I think it was 66. I had just turned 18.
Oh,
when-
okay. Wow, you're young already. How did you, so you were already dating Papa at 18?
Yeah, we started dating when I was 17.
Oh, okay. How did you meet Papa? Just briefly. I'm not going necessarily, or as brief as you want it to be.
Sure.
You know?
I had been in France for a year. And when I came back, I went to visit my sister who had gotten married and had a baby and lived in Charleston, West Virginia. It was a college town. So Papa had gone to school there. Yadunandan is called Papa.
My grandfather.
Yeah.
John Stalker.
John, Yadu, all the names.
So anyway, he was going to school there, and his best friend. So one of my best friends growing up was my sister's husband, and Papa and he had become best friends. So when I went to visit my sister,
Which sister?
Meryl,
So
My older sister.
Meryl's husband was Papa's best friend.
right?
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Very cool.
So when I went to visit my sister, there was Papa. He was staying the night, and he had a motorcycle, so it was
Yeah.
quite.
That's bad.
He was quite a little bit handsome, and he had a motorcycle, so it was all
He still
intriguing.
was
A
handsome.
little bit handsome. Just a little.
Now at that time, I guess I was 16 going on, 17 going on.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 17 going on 18. It was the summer of 66. Yeah.
Okay.
So Papa was there, staying overnight. He was about to leave for Pittsburgh. His mother, and he had grown up in Pittsburgh, in a different area of Pittsburgh.
Okay. So yeah, he had also grown up there, but you had never met him there.
Correct. They were in a completely different area,
Wow.
miles away. So then when I went back to Pittsburgh a few weeks later, or maybe a month, he came to visit me.
Okay.
And that's how it all started.
That's how it all started. He hunted you down. Cute.
Man.
So
Wow.
tell us about the first time you met Prabhupada. Like the first, maybe
Encounter.
whatever the encounter you feel that was really at least the impactful one. Maybe obviously you saw him, but the first time you really,
Connect.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. It's kind of deep, but so some arrangements were made completely without our endeavor. So I always think that, the small encounter without a real personal effect from my point of view was that Srila Prabhupada or Krishna in the heart was making arrangements. And So we lived in a college town at this point in Athens, Ohio, and it was out in the country just a little ways on the road going from Columbus, Ohio to Athens, or vice versa. And Yaru was working in the student union. He was thinking about going into photography, actually, as an occupation.
Wow. Okay.
But so he's working there, and he knew a fellow who would come in quite often, who was involved in getting alternative types of people to come to give lectures in the evening at the university.
Just as like to broaden people's horizons.
Yeah, I think Athens was a little bit of a, what's the word, progressive university.
Okay.
So one presentation we went to see was Timothy Leary.
Okay.
And so this fellow, I forget his name, he approached Yaru and said, "You live on the road from Columbus to Athens, and Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta is coming to give a lecture such and so time, and my house is being usually I host these people who come to give lectures, but my house is being renovated. So I wondered if you would be willing to host him when he comes."
And this is now after you had already met the devotees.
Yeah, you had like been.
Yeah, this is 1969, May, probably May.
Okay. And Athens, in which state again?
Ohio.
Okay.
So Srila Prabhupada
Athens.
had given a presentation to thousands, and I should know better, at the Ohio University in Columbus. And I think Allen Ginsberg was with him. And it was at least an hour long, I believe. And chanting took place, and it was like so well received. Thousands of people were there, as I recall. He had done that and then was doing some of these satellite things, like going out to other places when engagements were arranged. Wherever Srila Prabhupada went, he always wanted engagements to present something about Krishna. Because to Srila Prabhupada, Krishna is the be-all and the end-all, and letting people know about their dearmost friend is the most important.
Yeah. Very
So
cool.
so
he
you
stopped
guys
by the
just
house basically
got
briefly
to
after
put him
that.
out.
So yeah, he came. 2 cars. There was a minivan with unending devotees getting out of it, like a little circus trick, and then another. Gosh, Papa would know the kind of car it was, but like a Lincoln Continental that Hayagriva was driving, and Kirtanananda, they were in with Prabhupada in the car. So 2 vehicles stopped, and so we had a front lawn and a nice big backyard that was much more secluded and private, and then a little driveway along the side. Well, the devotees piled out, Prabhupada piled out, and as I recall, they didn't go in the house right away. They sat down on the front lawn. That's my recollection. Srila Prabhupada sat here, and the devotees sat in like a semicircle around him. And the porch was here with steps. So I had prepared some things that they had told me they could eat, but I was a little too independent-minded. We were doing macrobiotics. They said to make white rice, so I just couldn't see how anybody would want to eat that. And I made a huge pot of brown rice. And then they didn't want to offer any of it to Prabhupada.
He wouldn't eat brown rice?
No.
Oh.
I mean, at least they thought he wouldn't.
Oh. I wonder why. It's just because of his diet? Like, is it hard on his stomach or something? Or is there like an actual, like, is there like a more deeper reason than just... So I hadn't heard that was a...
Yeah, it was... when Srila Prabhupada grew up, I believe, or the Ayurvedic thing or something.
Where the brown rice is not so good.
Yeah, it's more heavy.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure it feels heavier. That's what I was
Yeah.
wondering if it was just a diet.
Yeah.
So it was just like a thing for his stomach being older, didn't want like the brown rice.
Well, I
like-
don't know if he ever ate much
okay.
brown rice. Not that he wouldn't, if you know,
Right,
I don't
right.
know that, but the devotees knew that he preferred
the
much more the white rice, so they didn't even offer it to him. But yeah, the whole wheat on the bean, the dal beans, the little smaller dal beans,
Yeah.
are the main staple, and then the rice is complementary. It's
Right.
not like your main nutritional factor.
Right, it's just there to kind of carry the rest of it.
Yeah, and it has some.
Fiber or whatever you
Well,
want.
yeah, I've heard. I don't know if it's true. It might have some kind of absorption quality.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
That's why when you get something wet like a phone, you put it in rice and it helps it to not die.
Yeah.
Sucks the water right out. So I'm sure it can probably help to absorb, like you're saying, like maybe things like things you don't want in your system, impurities. Yeah. Very cool.
So anyway, so this was the impactful thing. Walking. So I had made a fruit salad. Thank God. And I brought it out onto the porch. This big bowl. Well, we had sent out cups with yadu and spoons and things like that. And so I brought the fruit salad out, and I started walking down the steps. And as I turned toward the assembly, so Prabhupada's here, so I'm turning, I see Srila Prabhupada looking at me, and somehow he penetrated my heart and my eyes, and I felt very, very loved, but in a more deep way than is almost possible to express. It had to do with a universal kind of love. It wasn't a single person to person. Prabhupada felt like he carried a universal love, and that and I felt humbled by that, that immense presence and kindness and mercy. And I honestly felt like I couldn't walk or shouldn't walk, like I should crawl.
Wow.
I felt that humbled, and yet at the same time there was a sense of exaltedness that I was part of this. It was very odd to have those two things together, and as time gone on, those kinds of things that seem opposite, the way they come together is where I find transcendental consciousness.
Wow.
Wow.
So, in many, many aspects. Anyway, I managed to get there with the fruit salad, and the dishes were passed out somehow, and, the devotees were helping. Yadu was there. And then, so they took prasadam, and and then Prabhupada came in the house, and he used the bathroom, and he sat in a chair and looked around, and he seemed very pleased. It was a nice, clean, hippie house. And we had cushions on the floor. We didn't have much furniture.
Do you have one chair? Is that the? Or is
There
that,
was a
you have more than
rocking
one
chair.
That
We
was the
had
only chair
one
you
rocking chair, and then some cushions on the floor from an old couch, and a TV off in the corner. We watched Star Trek once a week. And Srila Prabhupada looked around. He said, "See, we have no need of couches. I think he said cooches, but couches." And we had a picture on the wall of what's it called? 2001, the Odyssey.
Oh.
Yeah, of the baby floating in space. So that was kind of, and so Prabhupada left. He went out, and we trailed along and went to the class. But at that was the time that I was captured. My heart was captured. I had fallen in love with this connection.
Yeah.
And then after the lecture, and I remember sitting there, like hanging on every word, somehow or other, I think I did understand pretty much, even though Prabhupada had something of an accent. And it just, everything seemed to, it emanated truth, emanated reality. So then Prabhupada came out and he got in the car and left, and the devotees decided they were going to stay overnight with us. So we went kind of close to where the cars were. There was a flagpole and some grass, and we had kirtan. Now, back up. I used to grind rice, the macrobiotic thing. It took me 45 minutes every day, every other day. At some point, it was a hand grinder. It was because my son was kind of ill, and he needed, the brown rice cereal was really good for him. So at some point I got kind of bored, just grinding. And then I remembered the mantra, and I had been for a couple of months prior is when it had hit me. Oh yeah, I could chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And I was doing that for a couple of months before they came to the house.
Oh, wow.
So then we're out on the college green with the flagpole, and we're chanting. And this is the first time that the whole impact of I can't say whole, but a great impact of the Hare Krishna mantra, the holy name, descended into my consciousness. I actually saw the beauty, felt the beauty of the holy name.
In that kirtan.
In that kirtan, when we were out, because that's where.
And Prabhupada was there with you guys.
No, he had left already.
He had left, and
but
it was you and the devotees.
He had left his mercy.
Yeah.
Wherever he went, he gave mercy. And you have to understand, wherever you're out giving Krishna to people, that is where Lord Chaitanya is. And he is the deliverer of the holy name.
Wow.
So Prabhupada carries all of that to all of us. So yeah, it felt like the heavens opened up and all the love was pouring out. It was really an ecstatic experience. So then, after all of that, how do you not embrace the holy name? How do you not embrace association with the devotees?
Yeah.
That's where your connection is.
Wow.
Did it so you mentioned that you had grown up in a Jewish family, not super strict in practicing, but you said you really loved the Hebrew language. Did you find the Sanskrit kind of spoke to you in the same way that the Hebrew language did? Is that another, did that maybe play a factor
In
your attraction to?
I don't think there was a direct correlation. We didn't have many books in those days. I'm trying to remember when Bhagavad Gita, I think, was just about to come out. So it's not like we had this, because the Devanagari is there and then the transliteration. So we didn't have the Sanskrit to look at. Now,
the first edition of the Bhagavad Gita didn't have the...
Yes, it did, but I don't think it had come out when we first joined. For my initial attraction, But there was an interesting phenomenon. We got initiated within a month, and struggling to get our rounds done. It was all new. Prabhupada's mercy. There's some, Srila Prabhupada initiated us in person. We were it was up at New Vrindavan. He was about to leave. It was so terrifying to think of him leaving, but so we had visited before, and we thought he lived there, because he was there for a whole month. We went to get rid of our stuff to move to the temple, and by the time we got back, he was about to leave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it was quite heartrending. But once we moved into the temple, as far as you're answering your question, the prayers had a, the other prayers that we say, pranams, how would you explain the obeisance kind of prayers? The prayers to Lord Chaitanya, the ones that weren't directly the Hare Krishna mantra, but the other names, holy names of the Lord, which he has hundreds and millions, those different songs that incorporated all that Sanskrit and some Bengali, were so easy to learn. They were just so automatic. I guess because every day we sang them, but within a very short time. And I remember specifically the prayers to Lord Chaitanya, the Sundar Archie prayers. Kiba Jaya Jaya Gora Chande Haroti Ke Soba. So those prayers, when we would sing them, I felt the same kind of feelings of, connection as that day at the flagpole.
Oh, wow.
So I always had a great affinity for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His, so preeminent importance in our movement. And Prabhupada explains that without Lord Chaitanya, you cannot understand Krishna.
Yeah, wow. What do you think, if you could take one thing that you learned from your life, I mean, it could be from Srila Prabhupada's teachings or your life experience, but if you could take one thing that you've learned in your life and teach it to others, what do you think is like the most important thing that you could pass on?
Well, that's a pretty big question, or deep. But
to clarify further on that, because I think there's two separate parts of that question. There's something like, on the one hand, like kind of like what would you teach to everybody if you could, or say if you could say one thing to all, however many billion people on the planet, what would it be? And then there's also like a passing on in the sense of like, for me at least, something that I was wanted to know was in relation to what he said, but a little bit more specifically, what would you pass on to the youth of today? Whereas I don't know if you just meant the entire world, or if you meant specifically to us, or like what was your...
Yeah, no, I got you.
Because I think it does change just a little in the nuance of that.
So you say Srila Prabhupada, you experienced that he carried this universal love. Is there something, like, what can you attribute that to? Is there something that you saw in him that was what allowed him to carry that kind of presence? And if you notice what that was,
Nice.
Okay, so the thing that came to mind initially as you were speaking is his connection to all the spiritual masters going back to Krishna and, to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and then to Krishna. Him following to the letter, in the mood of, I won't say to the letter, but in the mood of those acharyas, those spiritual masters, not changing anything, not giving his own interpretation, simply repeating the words, the understanding that Krishna is giving himself, and that it's understood through the other spiritual masters. So there's a connect between all the mood and the deep understanding on many levels, although it may vary ever so slightly amongst it. There's a strong continuum down through the ages.
Do you think some of that is attributed to the feeling of the lack of ego when someone is constantly referring back to other people and saying this is, what we're like, like the humbleness of just sort of repeating what previous masters that were repeating what previous masters that were repeating what previous masters that eventually Krishna himself said, as opposed to a lot of what we deal with is people giving their own opinions and thoughts. And so like they're almost, I'm just wondering if you think there's that humble aspect of just being like, I am just bringing this to you, it's not me. And that, that's very different than the way a lot of intelligent, or and they can be very actually intelligent people bring messages to people. In most cases it's very like, this is my theory, this is the way especially the way of life we grew up like in the Western world, it's very much like that.
Yeah, I'm so I wonder smart. If that let me now impart to you the wisdom I've gleaned from
this is what I've learned in my life, where he's saying this is what I've been told and this is what they were told and what they were told, and it's all coming. It feels like very powerful in that sense too, because it's not even like, I don't know, I'm just curious if that humble ego less.
Well, absolutely. of course, the initial recognition that of who we are in relation to Krishna fundamentally gives one that humble attitude.
For sure.
Excuse me, I choked on myself.
For sure. I mean, I think yes, but also obviously that's easier for some of us than others. It's something that should give you that. I don't know that it always does.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, whether how much one can actually imbibe it. Like just the words don't, but the actual realization on some level within yourself, I think.
And that's why one needs a spiritual master,
right, to help you,
or a spiritual teacher, however you want to word it. Someone who can, who is a life example, a living, moving example of that humility, and yet that exalted connection.
Yeah.
There was many things I was thinking of. Let's see.
So the guru is basically they're the embodiment, the living example, and play the role of God's direct representative.
Yes, and unless one contacts that energy,
and not just any guru, but an authentic, bona fide guru.
Right.
Who is actually practicing, not being a hypocrite. And they now are channeling the Shakti.
It also gives us an example of how we should be living.
Yeah.
Like you see this person embodying these principles. It's not just a theory.
It is possible for others to do it.
Yeah. And in the books that they leave, the words, because we only live a certain amount of years, but there's writings coming down through the centuries, and just reading. Sometimes people will get a book and have never met really talked to many devotees or met Srila Prabhupada, certainly, and they will read some of Prabhupada's words and have dreams about him. And there's an eternal, ethereal connection that's going, or transcendental, it's way beyond ethereal, but transcendental connection that Srila Prabhupada, he said, my books will be read for 10,000 years. So he's giving mercy through the books.
Wow.
That power is still present.
Yeah.
Still present. No.
I definitely can feel that to an extent when I listen to Prabhupada lectures, in the car or when I'm cooking at the house or something. As soon as, and I've never met him at all, but I've mentioned before in another episode, I think, or when Nita and I were talking at one point, like I feel like I've known him my entire life. And when I listen to him on the tape, it feels to me like he's speaking right to me, even though he's been physically gone for 30 years before I was born, but yet his physical absence does not diminish the power of his words. It's no different. You listening to the tape or reading the book is no different than being in his presence, hearing his words. It's very powerful.
Yes.
I think that's a kind of an element to some extent of truth, in the sense that like real truth, because there's like time you can get convinced of stuff because somebody's charismatic or because someone is like convincing in the moment, but real truth, pervades and lasts. Like it's not about, it's like the message, like you said, the power of that message being passed down. Like that's what he brought, and so that message is timeless. That message remains true, with or without, not without, but you know what I mean. Like that message itself is the truth. It's not that someone's smile or tone of voice, or they're just very persuasive with their different arguments. Like it's all coming from this feeling of like, oh, this all like adds up. This all is true, and it remains strong on its own, which is just an attribute of strength.
Absolutely. There's another component so this process, this Krishna, this personality of Godhead, is a personal connection, a personal path with all personalities along the way, and Krishna being the supreme personality, and we being personalities. And it's all extraordinarily personal, and the mercy that is given is personal. It's coming from those personalities. It's not just like a whole, vibrational oneness that's there, But this goes way beyond the impersonal understanding of God.
Right.
When
Which
you,
is very powerful.
I just wanted to. So when you, by that, do you mean that your interaction with others, you can almost? Do you mean that we should see our interaction with everyone in our life as if they were a conduit for Krishna's, like,
Being
love?
centered,
Like,
yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So whether you perceive them as maybe a positive or negative influence, that person is still really in your life for a particular reason, and that's coming from Krishna.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And how we deal with that and how we open ourselves up to receive the mercy that is allowing us to deal with it appropriately. And when we do mess up, how we then again go back to opening ourselves up to learn from what we've, mistakenly done or acted on.
Sure.
To ask for forgiveness if we've hurt people, to have some remorse, but ultimately to not identify with the positives and the negatives that have, that don't directly connect us to Krishna.
The temporary dualities
Yeah,
of the world.
yeah, and understanding that Krishna is the all-important factor here. It's not me. I'm the center of the universe only in the sense that my field of knowledge is kind of circling around my consciousness. But Krishna is the real center of all of our consciousness. He's within us, without us, we're part of him. So it kind of takes the onus off of us. We don't have to feel like if something wrong was done to us or we did a mistake. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. I still struggle with these things, to not identify with that. But actually, that's the way to be relieved of material anxiety is to be with Krishna, to give to Krishna those things that we have a hard time dealing with. And
that leads me into another question that I'd written down this morning. Something regarding struggles. What is something that you feel like maybe the biggest struggle for you? Something that you struggle with, or maybe if you overcome something large and it was a bigger struggle, but something like that you've struggled with in your life, whether you still are or not, is.
Right. No, I think just what I was saying is, making mistakes or feeling like they were mistakes. That ultimately everybody has karmic reaction, and we're all part of that.
Right.
But feeling like you could have.
You're responsible.
Your prescribed duty, your responsibility toward another person or toward a situation.
Like as if we have the control to change things, even though to some extent we really don't.
Right, like being frustrated and then becoming angry.
Right.
As a young mother, things like that. Those kinds of things are very regrettable.
What do you think is the most helpful for you when dealing with that? What have you found to be the most helpful to you when you're, or as you're working on that, just in general, long term and short term?
To be present to the emotions that come up, to not hide from it. There's different layers of regret, of working through things, of giving them up. In identification, there's different layers of that. So when they come up, just being fully present, not fearing my own emotional state at any given time, and little by little, feeling Krishna's protection in all of it, more and more. That he's sort of guiding the way, and that one advantage to making mistakes that is huge, it has a humbling effect. If you can be with it and not push it away and worry about it and worry what others are going to think, if you can get beyond that, it can have a humbling effect. If you don't, then it has the opposite effect.
Wow.
And then when you see other people making mistakes, you understand that it's just human. It's part of our growth.
So humility. I was listening to a lecture the one that I shared with you later. But what's his name? Real quick, not Mahatma Das. Yeah. And he was talking about the divine and demoniac nature, and he was saying how I think it was Jiva Goswami who asked these questions. There was like this series of 3 questions, and it was basically logically asking, does bhakti, and I don't remember verbatim, but it was something like, does bhakti or love give you humility? And the answer was, after all of this analysis, was yes, it does. But do you need humility to get bhakti? And the answer was also yes. And then there was a third part to it. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but what I took away from it was that, our goal of life, at least as bhakti, yogis or Vaishnavas, our goal is Bhakti Yoga. But it seems that there's like a tendency for people to think, well, I don't need to necessarily live in the mode of goodness. I'll just practice Bhakti Yoga, and eventually all those other things will kind of, all of those things will come. But what he was really getting at was that you have to be living in the mode of goodness to generate momentum to be able to get bhakti. And then the more bhakti you get, it also makes you, like, it's like a chicken and the egg thing.
Yeah.
So it really seems that humility is like one of the most key things, because that's where you learn, that's where you're able to get the value from your mistakes, is by being humble. So I just found that it was nice that you said that, which was also what he was really getting at, was the importance of humility in our spiritual life, but also our material life and whatever,
And just kind of like 3 things that are sort of tied together, but not completely. But if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Be careful.
Be careful.
Do not let your... So when I was a kid, I saw my parents sometimes being unnecessarily angry. And I said, I was 11, because I think Peter Pan had come out. So I think I got some of this idea from that. I said, I'm not going to grow up if I have to act like that.
Wow.
I can see that.
I'm just going to stay a kid forever.
So then, I have children. I've learned other things from my parents, not just how not to act.
Yeah.
And so some weird things like not wasting some other thing would get me frustrated with the children, and I would end up yelling. And so, somehow or other learning better to not act. So eventually I learned one thing, that I say the word frustration easily now, but I had to go through a lot of prayer and a lot of crying to realize, and it wasn't like I was angry every day. I was there for the kids, but but still, it hit me so hard when I would be unduly angry, because that was the thing I did not like. So this idea, like after a lot of prayer and meditation on it, on please Lord help me not do this, I realized that it was frustration, and it was that I was in an illusory state of mind, thinking that enough yelling and anger gushing out was going to change the situation, that it would somehow could alter it. When I realized that, it seemed like total insanity, and I was actually able to stop.
Nice.
Wow, yeah.
That's powerful.
And then Ian helped. My youngest son, I had never really yelled at him.
Yeah.
I was always pretty cool, calm, and collected by that time. And one day, I remember we were in the bathroom, and something was agitating me, and I started raising my voice. He looked up at me and he said, because he wasn't used to this, he said, "Talk nicely, Mom." And that was like,
That was
okay.
Aw.
Oh man.
Cute. Okay. We're
that
working
kinda
on
leads us
about like
in-
7 to 10 minutes before we should be trying to end here, because this recording app we use does have a time limit, and also
Okay.
I know you got to get
Yeah,
to the
1:30.
kids too. So
I have two
Sure.
questions.
Go for it.
Or I guess
we can
he
always
wrote
get to
this
more
down.
of these part 2
Yeah.
as well. We can get
So
you know,
you are always dedicating so much time and energy to the children.
that was the next one. Yeah.
So we grew up in Gitanagri. I've always felt, like I told you when you were at my house the other day, that you are like my grandma as well. I mean, you are. But you not only extended the same love that I saw you give to Nitai, who is your grandson, but I felt never that you treated me any less than him, even though he was your biological grandson. And you acted the same way to, and all of, for the most part, all of the devotees there did
Yeah.
treat us that way.
That is true.
But
Yeah.
why do you pour so much time and energy into the kids?
Probably to make up for some of those mistakes.
Oh.
To do it better.
Wow.
Because it gives me opportunities to be kind,
To
even
be
when
there for them.
provoked.
Right. Yeah.
And
Wow.
Yeah.
Gives you opportunities to try to get better at the way you
Yeah.
where you feel like you
So
need
the
to
mistakes
grow,
that you've
to grow
learned
more.
from, you now see your interaction with the new child as, here's an opportunity to practice the change that I wanted to make back then, but now I can implement it in this current
Yeah, with
situation.
Krishna's grace.
Mm.
Yeah. But the other thing is, I actually, for a good bit of my life, have enjoyed being with children more than with adults. For
What is
most adults.
Yeah. What?
Why,
do you
what
think
about
that is?
being around children do you
Well, first of all, they bring a freshness to life, and often have an openness to the learning process.
Mm.
Now, adults who are like that, I can hang out with them all day also,
Yeah.
but I find it a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in this day and age, it feels like. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
A lot of people are dug in. to
Yeah,
that.
yeah, so opinionated, one way or the other way,
Yep.
and not really using much wisdom. This
Or compassion, humility, all the things we've been talking about. Yeah.
yeah.
There seems to be some unfortunate lack of that these days to some extent.
Well, the informational age is bombarding us,
Oh,
True.
and
my
therefore
That is true.
there's the wisdom is kind of being.
You have so much
edged out.
information
Yeah.
being thrown into your brain at all times that sometimes when there is good wisdom, you don't have the energy or the want to deal with taking it in. And then also all the information you're taking in, to some extent, you just take as truth even when it isn't. So
Yeah,
I feel
that's
like
one
that's
of the
a good point.
reasons why we wanted
That
to do this
informational
and,
age
and
is-
interview the wise people that we grew up with, and because I definitely feel that there's, especially in American society, such a high risk of, we shut the, I work in the healthcare system. I see the old people get shut away in the nursing homes. They get forgotten by society. But in ages gone by, or other countries around the world, other cultures, they honor the old people. They see old people as this is a vast treasure trove of knowledge that when they leave the earth,
It's gone.
it's gone forever. I mean, think about how many ideas, like Neil deGrasse Tyson says in that one interview I was watching, how many geniuses or genius ideas are buried in the graveyard that never saw the light of anything.
Yeah.
And then I guess leading into my final question.
If you could, passing on or something else.
Yeah. So if looking back on your whole life, obviously you're, on your way towards the end of your journey in this life.
Oh, before
If-
you ask that question, wait, are you asking the second to last or the very last one?
The very last.
I was going to ask the second to last before, because I want to end on that one. If you could pass one thing on to the youth of today, one ideal or idea, what would it be? It may be similar to what you said to yourself, but I just wanted to, if there's something you could do for like the kids, because you spend so much of your energy and time, something you could pass on to them.
Spend time with Srila Prabhupada. Hear him, read his books,
Very nice.
I find excitement, like if you really read, and even doesn't have to be a long time at any given time,
Yeah.
you're touching like you said, like a treasure trove, a gold mine, and it stays with you. It's not
All
just
day.
it doesn't just stay up here. It goes deep into the heart and makes changes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, no, for sure. I
Prabhupada.
definitely, as I get older, I can see, like, oh my... Even as a kid, I would listen to, the Bhagavatam classes and stuff. And even as a child, deep down that, like, you'd kind of take it for granted, but at the same time, like, aha. Excuse me. Then later in life, when you run into the frustrations and the problems, now... That's when, in distress, oh, wait a second, I've heard this before. I know what to do here.
Wow.
And then, Krishna becomes or Prabhupada, or, becomes much more easy to go back to for shelter,
Right.
or, so yeah, I definitely, from my own experience, I feel like Krishna, being exposed to Prabhupada and those teachings, even Jesus, my mom also was very... she'd read us stories about St. Francis and the different Mother Teresa and Peace Pilgrims. So not just only Krishna worshippers, but just God conscious people in general.
Yeah.
For sure. And then the last one.
Yeah, and then this last question. So, if you in an ideal situation, how...
you were talking about death, how that was part of what enticed you into this.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like what comes after. So leading into this question.
Now as you're in the later part of your life, how do you feel about death and the afterlife? And under what circumstances do you think you will be most peaceful when it comes time for you to pass
what's the
on?
ideal way for you, if you have thought about, because I know that, especially because you brought it up also saying that that was something that kind of that was something you wanted to know more about as a child.
Do you feel like you've learned that, or something to help you answer that question?
Well, I feel most peaceful in any given day. And I have to say this honestly, the more I chant, like if I get more rounds done, if I've read a little bit, if I feel like I've spent the time that Krishna has given me in a valuable way toward this connecting with Krishna, with staying connected with Srila Prabhupada, not like pick a flower and bring it in and put it on the altar.
Yeah.
Some way. And I actually just ran into a godbrother who said the same thing. Because of COVID, we've kind of been estranged a little bit from our normal temple activities and things like that. So now we're a little bit more on our own to keep this consciousness connected. And he said, I feel like it's a good day if I've really, connected with Krishna strongly at some point in the day, if I've really made that connection. So that, to me, that helps me be more peaceful. The more I use my time in that way toward the end of life process, knowing that if I forget Krishna, he will remember me because we have this amazing connection.
So, and at the actual time, I'm assuming it sounds like you would just want to still try to remain as connected as possible.
Oh,
As the time
absolutely.
is
Yeah,
getting nearer, surrounded by chanting or reading or some.
yeah, definitely. Because the mantras are powerful.
Yeah. When you came over to our house, and I guess we can pick this up for like an episode 2, interview part 2, but you had told me some very beautiful, or related to me, your beautiful experiences with Bhakti Tirtha Swami.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to, since we're leaving off with this, the death and the, maybe if you, if you'd like to come back and share with us some of the things maybe you learned from your experiences with Bhakti Tirtha Swami and, some of the other, God brothers.
Yeah,
or God
we can get more in
sisters
depth with all that stuff for sure.
That have left, and what kind of an, like, because I see people die, you know, regularly at work in certain states of consciousness, and I've also been able to see some of the devotee, or, you know, not always Hare Krishna, but also Christian, you know, but the very spiritual,
Devoted.
deep, devoted people that pass, they always seem to me to be more peaceful.
Yeah.
And you know, you spend a lot of time with Bhakti Swami, and it would be very nice if we could.
I'll be
Yeah.
very, very
We
happy
can
to
talk more
speak
about
about
that.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very inspiring, wonderful.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I would say this has been an inspiring and wonderful conversation.
This has been great.
We're definitely nearing we might even be a little over the hour. I'm not sure. So we're going to go ahead and sign off on this one. But thank you very much, Taruni,
Thank you for having
Dasi,
me.
and
We
Mammy.
love you so much. Thank you.
We
for
love you very much.
being our grandma,
too.
our
Yeah,
Mammy.
yeah, that's our Mammy. The whole community's Mammy.
Yeah.
So everyone, don't forget to share, like, comment, and if you want to write to us, it's answersoflife@gmail.com, and that's ANTSW. You throw a W right in the middle of the T really is in the middle of answers. You could just put the T in there for ant, because we're small and humble like an ant.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the goal. That's the humility goal. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.